Welcome to this explainer, where we're diving into a pretty wild financial paradox. We're going to figure out exactly why the guy cheerfully drowning in loans keeps pulling ahead of the totally debt-free guy who did literally everything right. Today, we're breaking down the 6 specific ways people use debt not to dig a hole, but to actually build a mountain of wealth.
Meet Diego and Curtis. This whole dynamic perfectly captures our core paradox. See, Diego just signed papers putting himself another $200,000 into debt, and he did it with a huge grin on his face because his net worth just went up. But then you have Curtis. Curtis hasn't owed a single dollar to anyone in 9 years. He guards his perfect credit score like it's a winning lottery ticket. But the reality? Curtis is quietly and slowly going broke just by standing still. Diego got rich because of debt, while Curtis, well, he's just slowly losing ground to inflation.
So how exactly does Diego pull this off? Well, we have to distinguish between 2 completely different types of debt. And let me be clear, when we talk about debt making people rich, we are emphatically not talking about paying 28% interest on a couch you bought a few years ago. No way. That is bad debt. It's basically a wealth-eating parasite that just drains your account every single month for things that lose value. Good debt, on the other hand, that acts as a tool. It's leverage you use to buy things that either climb in value over time or literally pay you just to own them.
Now, the actual data behind who holds what might really surprise you. You'd probably expect the ultra-rich to be leveraged up to their eyeballs, right? But according to Federal Reserve data, the wealthiest households carry only about 12% debt relative to what they own. Now compare that to over 60% for the typical middle-class family. So the wealthy actually borrow less proportionally, but they get much, much richer doing it. Why? Because it was never about the total amount borrowed. It's entirely about what they aimed that borrowed money at.
Which brings us to way number 1, real estate. This is the most accessible, serious leverage out there. Real estate sits at the top spot because it's the most accessible, serious leverage a normal, everyday person can actually get their hands on. Let's look at the math that honestly breaks a lot of people's brains. If Diego buys a $250,000 property entirely in cash, and it appreciates by a modest 5% in a year, he makes $12,500. Okay, that's a 5% return. Pretty boring. But if Diego uses leverage, he puts down just $50,000 and the bank covers the rest. When that exact same house rises 5%, he still makes that $12,500 because he gets to keep 100% of the appreciation. He literally just multiplied his return by 5, earning a 25% return using the bank's money. And crazy enough, that's before a tenant even starts paying down his mortgage for him. Real estate investors scale this math using a loop affectionately known as BRRRR. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Here's how it works. Diego buys a beat-up place, fixes it up, and forces the value up. Then he refinances against that new, higher value and pulls his original $50,000 out completely tax-free. Why tax-free? Because a loan is an income. He then takes that exact same 50 grand, buys a second house, and then a third. He's reusing the same down payment on a loop. Meanwhile, poor Curtis is spending decades saving up to buy a single rental outright in cash. Moving on to way 2, business buyouts. Using other people's money to buy cash flow. This second method quietly mints more everyday millionaires than almost anything else out there, buying an existing cash-flowing business. See, most people think starting a business means eating ramen for 4 years and praying you don't go bankrupt. But instead of starting from scratch, Diego can just buy a boring, proven winner, like a plumbing outfit or a laundromat. Let's say it costs $800,000 and profits $200,000 a year. By using a small business administration-backed loan, Diego only needs to put down 10%. So he puts down just $80,000 and the business's own $200,000 yearly profit literally pays back the loan. The asset pays for itself. Private equity firms do this for billions, but everyday people can absolutely do it on Main Street.
Way 3, borrowing against assets, also known as the buy, borrow, die strategy. Think about billionaires like Elon Musk. They don't sell their assets, they borrow against them. If Diego sells his $5 million portfolio to get cash, he triggers a massive capital gains tax bill. We're talking almost $1 million gone. Poof. Instead, he borrows $3 million at a 6% interest rate. Sure, he pays $180,000 in interest, but his entire $5 million stays invested in the market, continuing to grow, and he gets to spend the cash tax-free, again, because borrowed money isn't income. And that die part of the strategy? When he passes away, a rule called the step-up in basis legally wipes out those capital gains entirely for his heirs. The slate is completely wiped clean.
Way 4, arbitrage and inflation, earning the spread while debt melts.
Here is exactly how inflation acts as a secret weapon for borrowers.
If you have a 3% mortgage and you invest your spare cash in a stock market that historically returns 10%, you're earning a solid 7-point spread. But inflation takes this to a whole other level. Think about it. A $2,000 fixed monthly mortgage payment might hurt in year one, but 30 years later, after decades of inflation, wage increases, and rising prices, that same fixed $2,000 feels like leaving a tip at a nice dinner. The Federal Reserve knows this for a fact. Inflation transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers by melting away fixed-rate debt like an ice sculpture at a summer wedding.
Way 5. The tax code. Rewarding productive debt.
You know, the public tax code quietly treats consumer debt like a vice and productive debt like a virtue. When Curtis pays interest on his finance truck, he swallows that bill entirely alone in the dark. It is simply not deductible. But when Diego pays interest on his rental property loan, he writes it off. Plus, he claims depreciation. The government actually lets Diego deduct a portion of the building's value every single year. It's a phantom expense that shields his real income from taxes, even though the building is actually going up in value. With rules like 2025's bonus depreciation, real estate investors can sometimes legally zero out their taxable income the very year they buy. It's wild.
Way 6. The core rule. Controlling what you can't afford. So, the crucial point sitting underneath all these tactics is a single motion, using other people's money to control an asset you could never buy outright. And this principle applies everywhere, even to student loans. Borrowing $40,000 for a nursing credential that adds $30,000 to your yearly income, that's an incredible trade. But borrowing that exact same amount for a degree that doesn't boost your income, you're basically just buying an expensive participation trophy. And look, we have to be honest here. Leverage is a really sharp knife, and it cuts in both directions. The 2008 housing crash, and actually Curtis's own real-life bankruptcy back in his 20s, proved that leverage does not care about your feelings. If things drop, your equity vanishes, just like that. To stay safely on Diego's side of the ledger and avoid leveraging your way into a crater, every single good debt play requires 4 strict conditions. 1. The spread must be real. The asset just has to out-earn the loan. 2. It must be an asset that appreciates or cash flows, not a toy disguised as an investment. 3. The leverage must be survivable, with a cushion for bad years. And 4. You absolutely must be able to keep making payments through the rough patches, because trust me, the rough patches always come. Miss any of these, and good debt quietly turns back into the kind that's trying to kill you.
Fast forward 10 years, Curtis guarded his money so carefully that it just quietly shrank in his hands due to inflation. Sure, he has a paid-off house and a flawless credit score. He didn't do anything maliciously wrong, he just missed the cheat code, leaving him with a quiet, nagging sense that he did everything right and still got lapped. Diego, on the other hand, took that exact same cautious instinct but aimed it at assets. He turned 1 down payment into 6 properties and a self-running business and retired at 50. He proved that debt, in the right hands, is the closest thing to a superpower ordinary people are allowed to use.
So the next time you're reviewing a loan or making a major purchase, ask yourself this: is this money buying me a liability that will chain me down or an asset that will set me free? Because ultimately, debt is just a multiplier. The only question you have to answer is, what are you multiplying?